What is up, Knicks fans? Welcome back to yet another episode of Fireside Knicks with your host, Dylan Backer. And guys, I think it's pretty clear that this New York Knicks team has a lot of flaws, right? And I think the depth is the biggest flaw. It is one that I've been emphasizing for a couple weeks now, and I think it's becoming more and more clear as time goes on that this team needs depth. They haven't had Karl-Anthony Towns for the last two games, and while Precious Achiuwa and Jericho Sims provided a decent impact against the 76ers, they provided virtually nothing on the offensive end against the Minnesota Timberwolves last night, where they lost by 17 points and had just a disastrous fourth quarter. They were only trailing by 3 entering that quarter, and then they just completely fell flat down the stretch. They had no answers defensively for any of those Timberwolves shooters, really. I mean, the Wolves shot a ridiculous clip from three-point range. Anthony Edwards had 36 points. Naz Reid was a perfect 6 for 6 from 3. The defense, of course, is a massive issue, which, that's something we've been talking about for a while, and at that point, we just need to hope that it fixes itself. It's a Tom Thibodeau-led team. I'm confident that it can fix itself just because of how defensive-minded he is as a coach, but it's clear that there's a lot of problems with this team right now. They're very good. They're 27-16, third in the Eastern Conference. They're only 2 games back from the Boston Celtics. It is not panic mode right now. This team is very good. They're destined to make the playoffs, but if they want to win a championship, they need to address the depth. Right? Mitchell Robinson has yet to play a game this year because of the ankle injury that he's still recovering from with the surgery he had in the offseason. And while he is pretty close to returning, it doesn't seem like that he's going to be back like this week. And even when he does return, they're still going to be missing some depth. The bench scoring is dead last for the Knicks in the NBA. Miles McBride has been pretty good, but other than him and outside of a couple spurts from Cameron Payne, there hasn't been much scoring from the bench. Landry Shamet appeared in the rotation for a little bit, and it seems like now he's completely phased out of the rotation. He hasn't even appeared in the last 2 games. Precious Achiuwa does not provide much offensively. We all know what Jericho Sims does. He provides basically nothing, and the Knicks are in fact looking to trade him. So they need to address the depth somehow. And the ways that they can do that, there's a few ways they can do this, but their options are very limited at the same time. They could, easily call up someone from the G League, have like Pacome Dadier get some burn in the rotation, even if it's for like 10 minutes. Now, I've been someone that's been saying that they shouldn't do that because, I don't think it's going to really make that much of a difference if you play the rookies in the rotation. I don't think they're going to play a whole lot to begin with, and I don't think the bench production is going to change that drastically. Obviously, I could always end up being wrong, and they end up playing the rookies, and it makes a huge difference, but me personally, I just don't see it with them. Or they can go a different route here, and they can work the trade market. Now, with the trade market, the Knicks can't make like another blockbuster. They've already shelled out a lot of their assets for Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns, which they did in the offseason. And while those 2 trades are great trades, I mean, the Bridges trade we all know was a bit of an overpay, but they're trades to where you acquire great talent to eventually make a championship team. We all know how those went. But they still need work on the bench. So if they're going to make a trade, it's going to end up being something pretty small. It's not going to be like a major move. I wouldn't expect anything major, at least. Anything roster shifting, like anything like that, I wouldn't really expect it. The only candidate off the bench that I could see possibly getting traded is Mitchell Robinson. And the only reason I see him possibly getting traded is just because of the lack of availability. But at the same time, as time has gone on this season and more games are being played, and the lack of center depth has really shown with Towns missing some games this year, I don't know if the Knicks can trade Robinson anymore. They might need him. I mean, as much as I've been saying that, his services aren't as needed as much as they used to be because, Precious Achiuwa is around now, and we, of course, have Towns starting at center, and you really don't want to take out any of the guys in the starting 5 just because they have played so well this year. But at the same time, Robinson gives you so much. He gives you an interior presence. He gives you rim protection. He gives you offensive rebounding. He gives you a lot. So I don't think the Knicks can move him anymore. I don't know if they can. Of course, you can always move him to acquire some bench scoring, which I could possibly see happening. I know there's been some mock trades out there, but either way, I don't know if the Knicks can do it. I think the Knicks need to hold on to Mitchell Robinson for at least this season, see if he can stay healthy this season, and see what he can provide for you off the bench. Someone had made a pretty decent point on Twitter. They said that the Knicks were as good as they were in the past few years because they had 2 centers that could come in and make an impact no matter what. And Towns, we know, has made a great impact this season. He's been phenomenal. He's 4th in the MVP ladder. He's having a fantastic season. He's on track to start the All-Star game. We know how well he's played. But behind him, we've had nothing. And that's really what has hurt the Knicks. Of course, I know I'm talking about the scoring here, but they don't have a defensive identity without Robinson. And, with all that being said, they need to really enhance the bench depth because right now they have nothing. And the ways they can do that, like I've been saying, you can go after some trade targets. Now, some trade targets are already off the board. One guy that they had been looking at for a while, Nick Richards, he went to the Phoenix Suns, so he is off the board now. That is someone that the Knicks are not going to be able to trade for because, he's gone to a much better team now, a team that is still trying to compete despite their struggles this season. So that's one guy right there that you can't go after. Other guys you can go after, though, I've seen some mock trades involving Alec Burks. Now, I know a lot of Knicks fans are probably sick of trying to bring back Burks, and I understand that because at the same time, he's not exactly the same player that he was a couple of years ago when he was with the Knicks. I do think he can make a decent impact off the bench for us, though, just because he is a guy that is willing to score and willing to create his own shot, and he gets it done in the playoffs, too, which I think is pretty important to, consider. At the same time, though, I don't want the Knicks to give up too many assets for Alec Burks because he's an older player. He's a guy who is not the same player as he once was, as I just mentioned, all that stuff. I know he probably wouldn't cost a whole lot because he's on the Miami Heat who, don't have a lot of stuff to move around to begin with, and also they're trying to look for their own trades themselves because Jimmy Butler wants out. That whole situation's just been really awkward, and I want nothing to do with it personally as a Knicks fan here. I want nothing to do with that Jimmy Butler situation. Let the other teams handle that. We don't need Jimmy Butler. We have a good enough starting five. We need bench depth. I mentioned Alec Burks, of course, and there's other guys too. The Utah Jazz have some intriguing pieces as well. They have Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton. Now, me personally, I am not a fan of Jordan Clarkson whatsoever, and Mike Breen clearly was not when the Knicks played the Jazz a couple of weeks ago. He took a lot of questionable shots, as Breen quoted, and he's, of course, his shot selection is just not there. But I like Colin Sexton personally. I do think he's a good player. I don't know really where the Jazz feel about him, though, on the market. I don't know if they're looking to sell him off or not. So that's kind of just a up-in-the-air speculative thing. The Chicago Bulls have a lot of intriguing pieces, though, and I think that's one of the teams that the Knicks really need to monitor. They have, of course, Nikola Vucevic, who might be on the trade market. Now, I don't know if the Knicks are going to pull off a trade for him, and I don't really know where he's going to fit either, because I know theoretically he could come off the bench or start at the 5 and Towns at the 4, but I don't know if they have enough assets to do it. I don't know if they'll have the finances to be able to take on a contract or anything like that, so I don't really know how realistic that is, but they have some intriguing bench pieces. Torrey Craig comes off the bench for them. They have, a couple of other guys, Javon Carter. Now, I know these guys aren't mind-blowing names. I know it's not like anyone that's looking around like, oh, I really want to get that guy. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but there's just no blockbuster move that they're going to be able to do this year. It's very unrealistic that they're going to end up acquiring a guy that's going to come in and start. They're going to acquire a guy that's going to come off the bench and probably play like 15 to 20 minutes. It's mainly to get some depth and give the starters some rest. Because the starting 5, 4 of the 5 Knicks starters rank in the top 5 in total minutes. The only one who doesn't is Karl-Anthony Towns, and the only reason he doesn't is because he has missed a handful of games this year with a various amount of injuries. So, with all that being said, we don't want our starters to get hurt or, get tired and fatigued, because it's pretty clear that fatigue is playing a factor. I posted this on Twitter earlier this morning, but, the Knicks net rating in quarters 1 through 3, they're top 10 in net rating in each of those quarters. They play great. Then the fourth quarter hits. They're 24th in net rating. Their net rating in the fourth quarter is negative 4.1. It's the only quarter they have a negative net rating in, and it's pretty clear that the reason why that is the case is fatigue. We see it a lot with this Knicks team. Down the stretch of games, they get tired. We see Karl-Anthony Towns huffing and puffing down the court all the time, down stretches of games, shots coming up way short, tired legs out there, they're not getting back on defense, lackadaisical all over the court. It happens. I get it. When you play a lot of minutes, you're going to get tired, and I know Tom Thibodeau doesn't have a lot of options right now, but I do think it's on the Knicks front office to kind of address that. I do. People blame Thibodeau for this situation, but I don't think it's his fault. I don't want to point fingers because it's not like the Knicks have made the wrong moves. It's just their roster is incomplete. So in order to complete the roster, they have to finish the job here, and they need to be able to acquire some guys that can come off the bench and give you some depth. Because what if one of these starters goes down? What if like OG Anunoby goes down with a long-term injury? Who is going to come in and start for him? Who? Because right now, it would probably end up being like Achua, which we all know how Achua in the starting lineup has worked out in the past offensively. And also, if that ends up being the case, who's coming off the bench? Who? You need some depth. That's how good teams end up getting far. You You have a deep team throughout the regular season, and then you get your best guys out there for the postseason. This team is built for the playoffs, which is a good thing, but you gotta have some guys ready for the regular season as well. When you're playing these guys too many minutes during the regular season, it's not going to work. You're going to end up getting tired in the playoffs, or someone's going to get injured, and I'm not blaming Tom Thibodeau for it. Too many people are blaming Tom Thibodeau. I think Tom Thibodeau is a great coach, and maybe, sure, Thibodeau could maybe let one of these rookies get a couple extra minutes, but in his defense, he does not have many options right now. He doesn't have many trustworthy options. We saw yesterday against Minnesota when Brunson was off the floor how poor the offense was. So he doesn't have options. So in order for the Knicks to address this depth, they're going to have to look in the trade market. That's really kind of all they're going to be able to do because, I know I mentioned the G League options before, but we know Tom Thibodeau does not like to play rookies, and I think there's some justifying behind that because, when you're playing guys that are underdeveloped and not exactly NBA ready on a championship level team, that could come back to haunt you. You could end up dropping key games because of that. I'm not saying that these guys are going to make a huge impact, but either way, it goes back to my point from before. You play these rookies, the whole bench situation that we're dealing with right now is not going to be much different. It's really not. That's kind of all I got to say, though. I do want to see what the Knicks are going to do at the trade deadline. It is about 3 weeks away from now, so I do think there's going to be some interesting moves. I definitely expect Jericho Sims to be moved at the very least for some draft capital. Who knows, maybe they can get a bench player out of him as well. I do think the main guy to watch for the next couple weeks is Mitchell Robinson, though, once again. He's on track to return to practice at the end of the month, which means he could possibly return to the court in February. Now, I do expect at this point the Knicks to keep him, just because of, how bad the backup center situations have been. But who knows? Maybe the Knicks decide they need to prioritize scoring more than the overall, all-around depth, with the defense and all that. And maybe they decide to move on from Robinson. Move on from his contract and get a guy that can score off the bench with some of the names I mentioned before, such as like Clarkson, Sexton, or Alec Burks, or somebody along the lines of that. They're not going to be able to get anyone mind-blowing, though. We'll just have to wait and see what happens, though. I am interested to see it, and I hope you guys are, too. We really hope you guys enjoyed this video, though. I think this is a good place to wrap the video up. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and, of course, this YouTube page that you were watching the video on. You can follow my personal Twitter account. It's right there on the screen. And I'll see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out.